Hey guys, thank you so much for coming to my talk on multi-agent influence diagrams. It's basically a tool which was developed by Collar and Milch using two really beautiful ideas in math and statistics called Bayesian networks as well as influence diagrams. And it's basically a combination of that and to derive the concept of causal inference, which you will basically be able to use to formally assess what an agent in any sort of system, any sort of game, what are the effects of that agent's decision, how much utility that agent derives from that decision. At the same time, what are the factors that affects the decision that an agent makes. It's usually speaking, most extensive form games deal with those specific attributes, but they usually deal with just the utility portions and not too much on what causes those utilities. So this is our attempt at using the multi-agent influence diagrams called MAIDs, and we want to use this to formally verify governance protocols, or more like the games inside the governance protocols that are played among the governance folks themselves, or between the user of the protocol as well as the governance, or like any two agents alive and breathing, right? So this is basically a proposal in a sense that we're proposing to use these. We've done a lot of research onto it. We've sent a paper at ACM DeFi security workshop. Hopefully it gets accepted. But yeah, let's see if you guys like this. So we start with the motivation. So a motivating example is basically a governance attack that happened on Compound a few weeks ago. So if you guys might remember, it was basically a whale in called Humpai. I think that was what the name was, who basically wanted to allocate about who basically submitted a proposal of allocating about $24 million worth of tokens into a yield fi protocol, I think, that was run by a group called the Golden Boys or something. I will be in the next slide. We'll see the CoinDesk article that was issued. Yeah, so this is exactly quote and unquote what was said by CoinDesk on the 29th of July. The governance attack on Compound, it involved a series of coordinated efforts to manipulate the platform's decision-making process through significant COM token delegations, COM being the governance token for Compound, led by a whale named Humpai, okay, I got the name right, who sought to allocate $24 million worth of COM to a yield-bearing protocol, not yield fi, yield-bearing, I just saw the word, he controlled called Gold Comp, which was run by a group known as Gold Boys. So what basically happened here was that there was a governance member who had a good bit of push or pull in the governance protocol that he was part of for Compound, and he was also, what he wanted to do was basically use his influence to pass a proposal that was not the most sustainable for Compound in general, or which was kind of like a scam, right? If you think about it, with this yield bearing protocol that they're talking about. Fortunately speaking, Compound governance got hold of that. They made specifications, they made rules on this protocol itself in order to make sure that there's no long term damage done to the crypto ecosystem, which was good work to them, I guess. Next slide, please. So what we basically work in, what we basically do is, so there are economic exploits, which is basically due to incentive misalignment. And as a way of speaking, we developed strategies to enforce crypto economic incentive compatibility in governance and to mitigate GEV. Now, GEV is, well, it's like, I mean, it's exactly how it sounds, like it's like MEV, but it's governance extractable value. It was a term that was coined by R.A.R. Klunt and a few of his collaborators who wrote a paper called Survey of Knowledge in Decentralized Finance, who basically talked about GEV as an economic exploit, where if you exploit the governance of a protocol, the value that you exploit from it, accrue from it, is basically your governance extractable value. Kind of like how block rearrangement in layer 1 blockchains, that's MEV, right? So we want to propose a potential solution candidate called multi-agent influence diagrams by, as I said, by Collar and Milch, who developed it at Stanford University a few years ago, using really, really awesome ideologies as well as background in, as I said, Bayesian networks and influence diagrams by Judea Pearl himself. As a way of introduction, before we get into how we developed this, as a way of introduction, my name is Abhimanyu Nag. I am chief scientist at Chainrisk Labs, also a co-contributor at RiskLayer, and academically speaking, I am a research associate at the University of Alberta in dynamical systems and statistical mechanics. So would love to talk about that as well if needed. Uh, so this, yeah, before we start looking into what a MAID looks like, other than the MAID we already know, we have, this is what it is. This is a graph, a network, as you see it right now, of just 4 arbitrary agents called A, B, C, and D. And this is called a Bayesian network. Bayesian in the sense that there are probability distributions associated with each of these agents. So the directions, what they basically are suggesting is that A influences B, B influences D, A also influences C, and C influences D. So this isn't saying, but necessarily saying that A influences the decisions of B. Rather, the probability of distribution of A, the decision that B takes is influenced by the probability distribution of A, right? It's indirectly the same thing, but there's a very slight connotation to both of them. Next slide, please. So let's start with a very motivating example, which is the very famous tree killer example, which was put forward by Collar and Milch themselves while they were writing their seminal paper. So what it basically is, and it's a big story right here. I'm going to try and read through it and explain as much as possible. But what it basically says is that Alice is considering building a patio behind her house, and the patio would be more valuable to her if she could get a clear view of the ocean, like how we all would, right? Unfortunately, there is a tree in her neighbor Bob's yard that blocks her view. Nobody likes that ever. Being somewhat unscrupulous, Alice considers poisoning Bob's tree, which would cost her some effort but might cause the tree to become sick. So, pretty straightforward, tell her. Bob cannot tell whether Alice has poisoned his tree, but he can tell if the tree is getting sick. And he has the option of calling in a tree doctor at some cost. And the attention of a tree doctor reduces the chance the tree will die during the coming winter. Meanwhile, Alice must make a decision about building her patio before the weather gets too cold. Very long-winded, I understand, but we'll have a way of making it simpler in the next slide. When she makes this decision, she knows whether a tree doctor has come, but she cannot observe the health of the tree directly. So it's a big situation right here that Alice and Bob find themselves in. Not an ideal situation in any sense of the word. We have a MAID for the tree killer example, where we have Alice's decision and utility variables, which are in dark gray, and Bob's are in light gray. So before we start talking about this, we have Collar and Milch to thank, who made this entire problem and constructed a network around it, right? And these are all basically like decision networks. And okay, are not in the exact words I would use, but for a general audience, this is kind of like a decision network, right? Where this is basically an action that Alice can take, which would use some effort, which is basically her utility, but her action would lead to the tree getting sick. Now, if the tree is sick, the tree doctor will be called. Why is this why is this a dotted line, not a strict line? It's because if the person can't tell, Bob can't tell whether the tree is actually sick or not, right? So the tree doctor's arrival will actually mess with Alice's decision to build a patio as well, right? Because if the tree doctor comes, the tree doctor will make sure that the tree is not dead. I mean, this is, even though it says tree dead, but the tree doctor will make sure that the tree is not dead. And at the end of the day, Alice's problem would be the view, right? Through a very convoluted way, whatever's happening, at the end of the day, Alice's utility is only the view, and Bob's utility is only the tree, right? The tree should be fine, that's the only concern of Bob's. The view should be perfect, that's the only concern of Alice's. So what basically a MAID is, formally speaking, it's a tuple of 4 different variables. The first variable being, so in the next slide, I think we'll see a simple governance game. But before we talk about that, I wanted to explain more about the 4 tuples that we have. The first tuple being the agents, the second tuple, the second variable in the tuple being the chance variables. Chance variables are basically the variables that affect a decision that you make, right? If you want to get some food, the factors that affect whether you want to get some food or not is hunger or even boredom, right? The third variable in the tuple is decision variables. So the decision variables are basically the decisions that you have to make. So in the same example of if I want to get a food, if I want to get some food, that's basically your decision variable. It's a variable because you can either do it or you can either not, right? Similarly speaking, the last and the final variable in the tuple is the utility variable, which is the amount of pleasure you derive from making each and every decision. So right now we start with a simple governance game, right? I'm going to talk about a very simple example of a very simple governance game with very simple factors, right? So assume that there are n homogeneous agents. When I say homogeneous agents, that's n agents who think the exact same way, are the exact same way. It's like me, but n, like 100 of me. We have the same exact thoughts, same exact information, same exact ideas, same exact passions, so on and so forth. We mean that all of these agents exhibit the same exact behavior given similar situations, who own stake in the governance of a protocol. Makes sense. Next slide, please. We also assume that the protocol has a governance token, gov, right? And each of these agents own some amount of gov that would enable them to vote on these proposals, which also makes sense. That's how in general governance protocols work. Proposals can be brought forward by members of the governance for the rest to make a decision on. Now, for the purposes of simplicity, for the purposes of this talk, we're going to assume that the member who brings in the proposal will choose to remain neutral and will abstain from voting. So, for example, for the purposes of this talk, we are going to assume that in a DeFi lending protocol, the proposal could be to strengthen the risk parameters of the collateral assets to allow a user to borrow less amount of an asset at the same amount of collateral, simply to preserve the sustainability of the protocol. So again, reiterating, there's going to be a member of the governance. They're going to bring forward a proposal to strengthen the risk parameters of the underlying collateral asset, through which a user of the protocol will be able to borrow some any asset that they want, right? So we'll visualize this model through the lens of MAIDs. So right now we start the formal specification of the problem, formally analyzing the problem through the tool that we call as MAIDs. So again, looks very mathy, but it's pretty simple. So as you recall that I talked about the MAID as a tuple of 4 variables, right? So this is basically initialization of those 4 variables. A is basically the set of n agents, right? The n agents being the n homogeneous agents in the governance of the protocol. DA being the set of decision variables for each agent, A belonging to the whole set of agents, whole set of n agents, where the only 2 decisions that the agents can make is yes or no. Basically, yes, I want to strengthen the risk parameters of the protocol, or no, I don't want to strengthen the risk parameters of the collateral asset in the protocol. Similarly, we have utility variables, which is a set of utility variables for each agent. That is how much pleasure they derive from making any of these decisions, yes or no, which is some of the factors that might contribute to them deriving this pleasure. Is basically say how sustainable this decision would be for the protocol, who will it benefit the protocol or not, is it safe for us, so on and so forth. And these are the chance variables, the factors which will affect the decisions, yes or no, that each of the governance members will make, which is right now, for simplicity, for the purposes of this talk, is just CR and MS. CR being collateral risk and MS being market sentiment, right? So CR can be either risky or not risky, and market sentiment belongs to the set good or bad, right? So we define the utility variable as follows. In this exact specification, in this exact DeFi lending borrowing situation, for any agent A belonging to A, again, this is going to be the same utility for every one of those agents because n homogeneous agents completely. So the utility that the agent A derives from making decision yes or no, given that the collateral risk is deemed to be a risky collateral and the market sentiment of that asset is bad, it's going to be plus 100. if the decision is yes, and minus 100 if the decision is no. As in, to explain, if the collateral is risky and the market sentiment of that collateral is bad, then the utility that the agent will get from choosing the decision yes to increasing the risk parameters of that protocol is plus 100, or that asset is plus 100, and the decision from voting no to that proposal is minus 100, which makes sense, right? Because if the asset is risky and we increase the risk parameters of that protocol, if we strengthen it, then it leads to the benefit of the protocol, and that is what the utility is here. Similarly, in the other situations where the collateral risk is risky but the market sentiment is good, if decision is yes, then the utility is also in positives, but is half as much as it was in the situation when the market sentiment was bad. Because the market sentiment is good of that protocol, right? Even though it's risky, if I want to increase the risk parameters, it will give me some pleasure, but it might not at the end of the day because the market sentiment is good, right? Similarly, it's the same in this scenario as well. In the scenario where in the vice versa scenario where the decision is no, but the market sentiment is good. Now, if in the situation where the collateral risk is not risky, where the collateral is not risky, but the market sentiment is bad, then saying yes, voting yes to that decision of sending protocol gives you just plus 25, but saying no to that decision is minus 25. Why the difference here is that even though the collateral is not risky and the market sentiment is bad, then the decision of yes would actually not as good as the decisions of yes in the previous two cases, because the market sentiment is bad. It's not risky today, but it will be risky tomorrow, right? There's a time component to this reaction, which is why plus 25 only, simply because we don't know yet. We want to play it safe, right? We won't get as much utility from in these if the situations were these, but since the situation is where the market sentiment is bad, we don't know yet. That's the problem. It's a qualitative variable that we've mentioned right here. Similarly, if the collateral ratio is not risk is not risky, at the same time the market sentiment is pretty good, we say it's just flipped from that situation. It's plus 100 if the decision is no, if minus 100 if the decision is yes, which is again a no-brainer in the situation. Next slide, please. So this is a causal influence diagram for the model. Causal influence diagram, as in the collateral risk, the market sentiment, they both cause the decision. The decision causes the utility. And so these market sentiment and the collateral risk also cause the pleasure that you will be getting from making any decision whatsoever. So they're all related to each other. One more thing that you'll all notice for all of you guys who are technical is that this is actually a DAG, a directed acyclic graph, where it starts from these two variables, right? There's no inward incidences of the edge. There's no inward incidence of edge to these two because these are where the decision is being propagated. The whole network is being propagated from these. If these factors didn't exist, this graph wouldn't exist. Similarly, you'll also see the ending node right here where all incidences are coming to this and there's no like propagation. I forgot the actual technical term in the graph theoretic sense. I apologize for that, but that's what it is right now. Next slide, please. Right, so when you have such a graph as the one shown in the previous slide, there's a way to compute the Nash equilibria for the MAID, right? So the point of that is that I know there's this huge algorithm here that Collar and Milch themselves gave to compute the Nash equilibrium in that graph theoretical setup. But the point of that is that the Nash equilibria is basically, as we all know, coined by John Nash, it's basically the point in the entire setup, the decision that you'll make that will give you the best utility irrespective of the decisions, irrespective of the strategies of all the other players in the entire same network setup, right? So this is the algorithm that basically suggests that basically is a computational approximation towards how best to calculate the Nash equilibria. This sigma basically is the is the strategy, and sigma to the power of m, which is basically an iteration of the strategy over and over again over m times, is basically the equilibrium of that MAID. I will not go through this too much. It has like a few different terminologies that I need to mention, like topological ordering, mixed strategy profile, so on and so forth. I even haven't mentioned sigma properly. But this is more of like a very, very formal assessment of the algorithm. So I would love to take questions for that after the talk. But what it basically does is that, okay, you're getting your utility from making decision A, you're also getting a utility from making decision B. And in all of that network thing that you saw in the tree example, that you saw in the causal inference diagram example, in all of those combinations, one by one, what is the best course of action, like of in a tree form, basically. So like how you see in an extensive form game, that the game can be like discussed or like described as a form of tree, where you're making a decision, you have these two decisions to make, you have these two roads to follow, you're making the decision A or decision B. So it's basically tracking the tree back to its roots. And that's basically where the Nash equilibrium comes. You'll basically see the maximum utility that you get from following each of those paths, and then the best utility, the optimal policy the best utility that you get will be your optimal policy, which will invariably be the Nash equilibrium if 3 or 4 or n number of agents coincide together to that exact decision. Next slide, please. So the Nash equilibrium of this exact situation, coming back to our DeFi lending borrowing example, the Nash equilibrium has been computed by the MAIDs using the PyKid library developed by Google DeepMind, who've been using MAIDs for assessing agent incentives in decentralized AI setups. I would love for you to refer to the original documentation of the PyKid library on GitHub, written by I think written by the people at Google DeepMind themselves. So what they're basically saying, for decision variable V, if the collateral ratio is not risky, as written 0 here, and if the market sentiment is not, if the market sentiment is good, or sorry, not good, bad, which means the market is not very happy with the protocol, the decision, the decision would be to say, okay, I'm sorry about that. Let me rephrase. If the collateral is not risky, at the same time the market sentiment is good, 0 means good, then the decision that the voter is supposed to make is 0. That means don't strengthen the risk parameters. But in any other situation, if anyone else is in any form risky or bad, if the market sentiment is bad, or if the collateral or the collateral is risky, or if both of them are risky and bad respectively, then the optimal policy is to vote yes. So since, next page please. So this is basically a summary of what we found. The optimal strategy sigma, as I mentioned here, for every agent would be the vote for strengthening the risk parameters in case the collateral dynamics are risky or the market sentiment is bad. Similarly, against the proposal only if both the collateral dynamics are less volatile and the market sentiment is good. So this is basically the optimal policy for each and every agent, each and every homogeneous agent in this example governance protocol. So that basically implies that assuming that there are 1,000 of me's in this protocol doing the same exact things, having the same exact having the same exact chance variables, same exact decision variables, same exact utility variables, my optimal policy is to go with the tide, is to say, as I said, uh, say yes to strengthening the risk parameters if anything is risky at all, if anything is bad at all, right? Which is true in real world conditions. Next page, please. So again, some more tidbits from our experiment. The expected utility for every agent is 68.75, the maximum utility being 100, as you guys saw. That is the expected utility of sigma strategy, the optimal strategy, is 0.25. Recall why 0.25? Recall that each and every decision has the same exact probabilities of occurring. 4 decisions that you can make, it's 1 by 4, right? So it's 1 by 4, 0.25 into maximum optimal policy in situation 1, maximum situation 2, maximum situation 3, maximum situation 4, 68.75. So this is basically saying that assuming I am making the same decision, if I have to make the same decision over and over again in an infinite basis, assuming there are adversarial agents inside the protocol, my expected utility will always be 68.75 if I'm going with the grain, if I'm going with the other members in the governance protocol. Now, this is a note. We have assumed that each and every one of the voters has the same exact voting power, irrespective of how much stake they have in the protocol. If the voting power was stake based, the expected utility would have been the total amount of governance tokens owned by the agent divided by the total supply of the governance token multiplied by 68.75, which makes sense. Just a ratio of the entire expected utility, right? Next page, please. Now, this is basically a multi-agent setup. Now, what I recall that what I did right now was just for a single agent. Now, in the multi-agent setup right here, since the population of governance voters is assumed to be homogeneous and similar, we just take cases of two agents, right? Say, if there are 100 of me, if you see the dynamics of just the two of me, you'll be able to basically expand that to every other agent, every agent in the entire system. So let us again initialize the variables. Agent A, agent 1 being A1, agent 2 being A2, two agents, two arbitrary agents in the system. Utility of agent A1 being U1, utility of agent 2 being U2. So we change the perspective of the game. Now we have assumed that we have assumed before each of these agents has the same exact chance, same exact decision, and same exact utility variables. So let's see how this game works out. Next page, please. So this is a multi-agent causal influence diagram. This is where we are. This is an actual MAID with multiple agents. Recall that before what we saw was only for a single agent. So what we're seeing here is that agent A1's decision is going to influence agent A2's decision, which is going to influence agent A2's utility. At the same time, agent A1's decision is going to influence agent A2's decision and agent A1's decision. At the same time, agent A2's utility as well, right? So their decisions will affect each other, the utilities of each other. Because think about it this way. This is assuming that the game is not simultaneous, that they're not making the decisions at the same time. So what happens is I'm an agent A1, I make decision, and you can see my decision. So time step 1, agent A1 makes the decision of strengthening the protocol. So for A2, that decision will automatically affect what my utility is. If I was going to make the same decision, my utility increases. If I was not going to make the same decision, my utility decreases, because I know that there's someone who's competing with me. Next page, please. So again, very beautiful, like a very beautiful output right here. I wish I could show you the whole source code to show you how beautiful this output is, but this is basically a pure Nash equilibrium for the two agents, where what it's basically saying, given agent A1 makes decision 0, agent A2 should make the same exact decision in the next time step. Similarly, given agent A1 makes the decision 1, agent A2 should make the same decision. That means if agent A1 says make the decision to not vote for the proposal, or to so basically not abstaining is not something we're looking into here. But if the vote is no to that decision, agent A2 should vote no. Similarly, if agent A1 votes yes to the decision, optimal policy is to vote yes as well in the next time step. And because this is again assuming these are n homogeneous agents with the exact same decisions themselves, so that is how they will be maximizing the utility, right? Next page, please. So this is basically a summary of the results that we have. The analysis indicates that in the two agent system where A1 acts as a leader, the optimal strategy for agent A2 is to mimic A1's decision. So consequently, where all agents possess identical utility functions and information, there exists a strong incentive for each agent to adopt the optimal policy of every other agent, leading to a collective action scenario, which is beautiful. In a very simplistic way, this is exactly what the MAID is telling us. The MAID is saying that in a system where everyone has the same exact incentives, has the same exact has the same exact underlying passion to make sure that the protocol is completely safe and secure, they should all mimic each other's decision. So it also is like it's an example of a Stackelberg game, where in a Stackelberg game, what happens is that there's a leader. He moves first, and then all the followers come. They mimic their decision. They do what's best for themselves because the leader is doing what's best for themselves. Next page, please. So what does it mean for DeFi governance protocols? It says that if one could claim that if the optimal strategy for any arbitrary agent in a DeFi governance is to promote protocol sustainability, then the protocols should have no instances of manipulation, such as governance extractable value, which is basically accruing value from making a governance decision that only benefits you and no one else. This is assuming homogeneity of agents. In case there is a deviation from the optimal strategy, or if there exists an incentive to deviate, then there will exist an instance of attack behavior, which may be harmful to the protocol. May or may not be. Like if you deviate, you could also be deviating towards the sustainability of the protocol as well. So let's look at a simple attack model in this exact situation, right? So let's spice things up a bit, I guess. So a simple attack model, from what I've understood, is that we introduce now an adversary into the system. What happens is that our model assumed homogeneous agents previously. We now introduce an adversarial agent to capture potential malicious behavior. So now again, think of a two-agent model, two-agent governance protocol. One agent is honest and rational, but the other agent is adversarial. He wants to do the opposite thing and he wants to win, right? Formally, we extend the model by introducing an additional agent with identical chance variables, identical decision variables, decision space, as the other agents. However, this adversarial agent A dash possesses a distinct utility function, which is UA dash, and he will disrupt the protocol by acting contrary to the interests of honest agents. So what it is that there's going to be a difference in the utility function of the adversarial agent as opposed to the honest agent. So let's see the utility variable utility function of the adversarial agent in this setup. Given the collateral risk is risky and the market sentiment is bad, the decision of yes will actually lead to a downfall of the utility of that agent. Similarly, if the decision is no, it will add. It will be a plus 100 instead of a minus 100. And everything that you'll see here is exactly opposite. That is basically what we quantify as adversarial behavior in this setup. So next page, please. So again, consider a governance proposal to strengthen risk parameters for a risky asset, under standard assumptions of agent homogeneity. Recall, the optimal strategy in Nash equilibrium is to vote yes, yielding a utility of plus 100 for everyone. Now we introduce an adversarial agent with the primary objective of disrupting the protocol. So this is basically in contrast, voting no to that exact same situation would result in a utility of plus 100. Again, formally speaking, system has two agents, and A1 being the honest agent A, A2 being the dishonest agent A dash, where U1 and U2 are the utilities of the honest and the dishonest agent respectively. So we start with the construction of a payoff matrix for both the agents through their utilities, given a decision that they make about the proposal given above. So what it is that the payoff matrix looks like the following. This is honest agent A, dishonest agent A dash, 0 being voting no, 1 being voting yes, again for both of them. So this is, if both of them vote no to this proposal, agent A gets 100. Agent A dash, the malicious attacker, he gets a payoff of 100, but the agent A, the honest agent, gets a utility of 0. Why 0 and not minus 100? That's embedded in a game theoretical argument, which is left as an exercise to the reader for now. But similarly, agent A dash, the adversarial agent, if he says 1, which is yes, vote yes for the protocol, even though it's risky, even though the underlying collateral is risky, vote yes, and at the same time the honest agent votes no, then this is minus 100 for both of them, right? Because one agent says, the honest agent votes yes, but the utility is in the negatives, because if the protocol is not weak in the first place, why would I vote yes? Similarly, if the protocol is not weak in the first place, the adversarial agent voting yes would actually get plus 100, which is shown right here. So in the situation where the protocol is risky, the underlying collateral asset is risky, voting no gives a utility of 100 for the attacker, and voting yes at the same time gives a utility of 100 for the honest agent as well, right? Can you go back? So This here is the optimal policy slash the Nash equilibrium for both these agents. So no matter what happens, through the payoff matrix, we understand the honest agent. So the honest agent always has an incentive to vote yes in a risky situation. Dishonest agent always has as the incentive to vote no in a risky situation. This way, please. And this is what the MAIDs tell us. This is exactly what the MAIDs tells us, that given agent voting 0, which is no, vote 0. Also given agent A1 voting 1, which is yes, vote no. So no matter what decision anyone else makes, just vote for the opposite decision. Just vote for the decision that maximizes your utility by being harmful to the protocol, right? So this is the Nash equilibrium for honest agents versus attacker, please. Next page, please. So again, summary. Solving the MAID reveals that agent A dash, the adversarial agent, he adopts a dominant strategy of choosing 0 irrespective of the decision away. Conversely, the agent A, honest agent, exhibits a dominant strategy of selecting 1 independent of the choice of A dash. Both agents have an expected utility of 0, which is very important in this context. Because what happens is now what's happening is that there's a tug of war. There's a tug of war between the honest agents. There's a tug of war between the honest agents and the adversarial agents. So both of these agents are now trying to pull the others towards themselves. So what's happening here is that so honest agents achieve non-negative net utility when constituting a majority, like how you have it in tug of war. If you have 2 agents against 1 adversarial agent, 2 honest agents against 1 adversarial agent, and when you pull, and when you have this tug of war, it's obviously, again, this is assuming they're all the same. They don't have like any muscles, right? They have the same exact muscle capacity and muscle density. Because again, assuming that this is not a stake-based model, if there are 2 of the same kind pulling towards themselves, they'll win, right? So this is what it is. This is what a governance decision is. There are 2 teams playing against themselves, having a little tug of war between themselves. The one which constitutes the majority wins. This is right now 2 agents only. One is honest, one is dishonest. That's why their expected utility is 0. That means I am an adversarial agent. My expected utility, if I was an honest agent, was 68.75, as you saw in the previous slides. But if I am an adversarial agent, in this situation right now, my expected utility is 0, right? So this is one of the biggest, this is not very, like for seasoned game theorists, for seasoned practitioners, for even governance members, this is not very new, right? I mean, of course, we all know this. Anyone who's read even a little bit of game theory knows this. But what this basically shows is that the MAIDs are a really good tool to use, to be able to intuitively figure these ideas out. That's what we're proving right here with this talk, that the MAIDs are actually able to figure out whether or not what is the situation and where will the game go, given these are the variables that are affecting each of the members in the entire protocol. So right now, we have some future works. We have some things that we're still racking our brains on right now. Next page, please. So yeah, I mean, let me just reiterate, I guess, because we have a slide here. As long as there's a clear majority of honest validators, governance is guaranteed to make the right decisions. But for stake-based protocols, there should be a clear majority of ownership, right? So this is, what I'm basically saying here now is that for stake-based protocols, for stake-based governance, which is what is happening, which is what is, I think, the norm right now, the more muscles you have, the more muscle density the little amount of players has, the more they'll be able to pull. Unless you put like 1,000 different people on the other side, right? So it's not very, like the mathematical derivation of this fact is not very, it's pretty trivial. It's not very hard. You can sit and just use a page to do it in like a few minutes. But the application of MAIDs effectively demonstrates the framework's capacity to verify, to formally verify agent incentives within a governance protocol, highlights its accessibilities and utility for analyzing strategic interactions. That was what the aim was for this talk. I hope I've been able to effectively convince you that MAIDs are a tool that every governance protocol, anyone designing governance protocols, anyone thinking of formally assessing governance protocols, all the games that are played, intricate games that are played within that governance protocol should be analyzed. And we have some, as I said, we have some open problems, we have some open discussion problems that we have in the future. Next page, please. So we have right now are in the process of developing a multi-agent influence diagram for compound protocol. We have a very explicit and a very convolutional diagram. Like you have, there's like way too much information. Next slide, please. Next slide after that, please. So this is basically what the MAIDs look like for the compound governance as well as the compound protocol in a sense. These are all the interactions within the smart contract modules, the risk parameters within the governance, the user, and all the chance variables that are affecting each of these decisions and each of these functions, basically. Some of these are pretty static, right? Some of these are pretty static, especially the smart contract modules, but most of them are not. So this is what the research team is doing at Chainrisk Labs. We are basically formally assessing this using the MAIDs on this. We are having some ideas about analyzing sub games that can be played amongst the governance and the user, between users, between, as we've talked about today, between governance members, and even also external attackers. So that's where we are right now. That's what the state of art is in of using MAIDs in governance protocols in governance protocols in DeFi. Even layer, it can be easily extended to layer 1 protocols, layer 2 protocols. But yeah, that's where we are at right now. Next slide, please. Thank you so much for listening. GG to all of you playing governance games. I was Abhimanyu Nag. I am from Chainrisk Cloud, and this is my Twitter. You can reach out to me anytime. Thank you so much for listening to my talk. Thank you.